Well, good morning. Welcome to New Life. Thanks so much for being here this morning. We are on the final week of our 3-year-long Jesus Project series. So this is it. This is the last one. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. It's kind of strange. I don't know what we're going to do after this. No, that's not true. That's not. I totally know what we're going to do about after this. You guys who know me know I know what we're going to do after this. But I don't know what we're going to do after this in the sense of it feels it's a little bittersweet for me to kind of hit the end of this. This has been like such a journey for me. I have loved every minute of preparing for it, and well, not every minute. I've loved most of the minutes of preparing for it. Some of the ones that were difficult and hard to work through, I didn't love preparing for them, but I thought it was helpful for us. And I hope, don't fear. We are still going to talk about Jesus after the Jesus Project is over. We're not done talking about Jesus. But our goal when we set out with this was to hopefully help us be slightly better followers of Jesus at the end of it than we were at the beginning. To make some growth, to make some progress, to make some maybe changes in the way that we not only think about Jesus, I think that's important, but also in the way that we actively do what it means to follow Jesus. And so hopefully as a result of the time that we've spent together, we have become better followers of Jesus, not perfect followers of Jesus, but just better followers of Jesus who understand him a little bit better and maybe are able a little bit better to live out his mission and his message in a world that desperately, I think, and I think you know this, a world that desperately needs to hear the good news about Jesus. And we are the people who represent that good news about Jesus back into the world. And so as what we've been doing over the last few weeks is just recapping the series, a 3-year-long series in 4 weeks. And we talked about John's gospel. A few weeks ago, we talked about the idea that in John's gospel, we hear this big idea that heaven is coming to earth, that there's something happening in Jesus, that when Jesus showed up, it was as if heaven had showed up on earth, and that Jesus was reuniting heaven and earth together in a way that had never been experienced from the time that sin had entered into the world. A couple weeks after that, or the week after that, we talked about Mark's gospel, and we told the story of Jesus as the Messiah. Jesus as the anointed one, Jesus as the one that God had sent into the world to rescue and redeem his people. That's such a huge theme takeaway for us, is that Jesus had come to rescue and redeem a broken people, bringing them out of bondage and slavery into a new kind of freedom. And then last week, we talked about Jesus as the Son of David, Jesus as the King of an everlasting kingdom, the King over every kingdom, including your kingdom and my kingdom. And that what Jesus invites us to do and what Matthew invited us to do was to open our doors and welcome the King and say, "Have mercy on me, Son of David." And this week we're going to close out the series by talking about probably a summary of what I think is my favorite gospel. And I know you're not supposed to have favorites, but it's like how you have children, right? Like you have children and your children always ask you which one of them is your favorite child, right? Does this happen to anybody else? This is like a conversation that goes on between your kids and went on between my siblings and I. Luke is my favorite gospel. And here's what I mean by that. It's the way that you love your children, right? Like you love them all the same, but you love them differently. Right? Like there's we have different relationships with each of our children. I have different relationship with each of the gospels. I love all of them. I love them all, but they're all different and they're unique. And Luke is for me the one that maybe speaks most to who I am as a human being. And one of the reasons why I feel that way about Luke is that I grew up in a church world that was all about trying to create some separation between us and the world. We wanted to make sure that we did not mix and mingle too much with those non-Christian people out there. And so what we did was we spent all of our time around Christian people. I've told you this before, you know this, some of you grew up this way. We had Sunday school on Sunday morning, and then we had church on Sunday morning after Sunday school. And church, when I say we had church, right? Like church didn't get over in an hour and 15 minutes. That was just the singing. And then there was the preaching after, and then there was the singing and the altar call after that. We could be at church till 1:30 on a Sunday, and then we would come back again on Sunday night, and we would do it all over again. In fact, it could be even longer on Sunday night, because Lord knows Nobody's got any place to be other than church. And then we had, Wednesday night Bible study, and we had, Thursday night, Friday night youth group, and we had Saturday night prayer, and they do the whole thing all over again. We were very wrapped up in making sure, and part of it was, part of it was good, and part of it was healthy, and part of it was just we needed to make sure that we had enough time with each other that was away from the sinners out there. And what I got, and maybe again, this wasn't necessarily the way that it was meant, but the way that I heard these things was if you spend too much time around people who are sinners, you're going to eventually become a sinner like them. It's going to rub off on you. If you spend too much time around the world, they will corrupt you. They will change your mind, they will change your habits, they'll change your behavior, and you will become like one of them instead of like one of us. And it was painted to me, especially in my teenage years, as this sort of slippery slope to the place where you could lose your faith eventually. It was a fearful kind of way to teach people to follow Jesus. It was a way that said, hey, you've got to be afraid of those people out there. Don't be afraid of the people in here, although we should have been afraid of some of the people in there. Don't be afraid of the people in here. Be afraid of the people out there. It was almost as if, and again, I don't think that they meant to say that this way, and I don't think that they meant to communicate it this way, but it was almost as if greater are they out there in the world and more powerful are they than what Jesus is and what Jesus can do in you as a human being. So when you go out into the world, make sure that you kind of keep to one side and you keep the world over there and you just kind of stay in your lane. You don't want to mix and mingle with them too much. And then I started reading the Gospels. And when you read the Gospels, what you find is that Jesus runs to sinners, not from them. And all of a sudden, for me, especially in the Gospel of Luke, this is central to the theme of the story that Luke is telling about who Jesus is what you find when you read about Jesus is not that Jesus spent time running away from sinners and making sure that he stayed in his lane and making sure that his disciples stayed in their lane and making sure that he insulated them and protected them and they couldn't get the world cooties on them out there. Instead, what you find is Jesus running to these sinners. In fact, the thing that gets leveled, the accusation that gets leveled against Jesus over and over and over and over again is, Jesus, you spend too much time with sinners and not enough time with the religious people. And if you are spending too much time with these sinners out here over there, you're not spending enough time in the presence of righteous, holy people who are going to, kind of encourage your faith and build your faith up and challenge you and get you to be a better person. We created this idea that if we could insulate ourselves from the world, that we would be protected from ever falling away. But what you find in the Gospels is that has nothing to do with the mission and the message of Jesus. In fact, Jesus seemed to believe that he could not do what he had come to do if he was just spending time with religious people. Jesus seemed to believe that he could not accomplish the mission for which he had been sent into the world if all he did was hang out with church people. He recognized that his mission and his message required his presence around people who are not always religious, not always and already righteous, were not doing the things that they were supposed to do. And he seemed to believe that when he showed up in those places where those people were, he wasn't going to be corrupted by them. They were going to be influenced by him. And Matthew and Mark, this is, you see it in Matthew and Mark, but Luke in particular has this theme that Jesus spends time with sinners. And one of the primary places that we see Jesus spend time with sinners is at tables. He sits down at tables and he has meals with sinners. And every time it seems like Jesus sits down at a table with a group of sinners around him, there's another group of religious people who stand by and they're like, There's too many sinners at your table, Jesus. Like you got to separate yourself from them. You got to come over here and you got to spend some more time with us. It's not, and again, as we read through the Gospels and as we thought through this, it's not just that they believed that the sinners were immoral people. They actually believed that because of the sinners in their midst, God was not moving to rescue his people. And that until those sinners cleaned up their act, which, by the way, we don't know how they were supposed to do that, if you don't spend any time with them. But until those sinners cleaned up their act, God was not going to move to rescue his people. And then along comes Jesus saying, God is here to rescue his people. He's here to rescue his people through me, through my presence. And I am going to spend my time with sinners, with tax collectors, with prostitutes, with the people that you have overlooked and the people that you have marginalized and the people that you have decided were not worthy of your presence. It is incredibly offensive for Jesus to do what he does because they believe that those people were holding God back from acting on their behalf. And Jesus says, God is acting on your behalf. He's acting on your behalf by running to the sinners, not running from them. It's a theme that begins early on in Luke. And one of the first scenes where we see it is in a conversation that Jesus has with Peter. Jesus comes along to the Sea of Galilee, begins a conversation with Peter, teaches the crowds, talks to Peter, says, can I use your boat to teach the crowds? Peter says, sure, use the boat. When the teaching is finished, Jesus says, let's take the boat out, let's go fishing. And Peter says, we've been fishing all night, Jesus. I don't really want to go fishing anymore. I mean, maybe he's just tired of fishing and he hasn't caught anything. And again, this isn't just recreational fishing. This is like Peter's livelihood. So this is not just, Peter, just didn't have a nice night fishing. This is like Peter may not eat this week because he didn't catch anything. And Jesus says, let's go out and let's go catch some fish. And they go out and they have this miraculous catch of fish. And then here's what happens after. It says, when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees saying, depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching men. See, what Peter sees is, depart from me, Lord. I'm a sinner. You don't need to spend time with me. I'm too broken. I'm too messed up. I've got too much going on inside of me. You, Jesus, should separate yourself. You should run away from me. Jesus looks at Peter and says, that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to run away from sinners. So Peter leans away from Jesus, and Jesus reaches out and draws Peter closer. And this is the beginning of this theme that we see inside of Luke's gospel, is that Jesus comes along and says, you're a sinner, you're broken, you're a mess. Don't run away from me. I'm not running from you. Instead, I'm going to ask you to come closer. I'm going to ask you to come and follow me. If you come and follow me, Peter, I will make you a fisher of men. I will change and transform the entire course and direction of your life. Peter, it doesn't have to be this way where you think that because you're a sinful man, you can't be in my presence. And because you're a sinful man, I don't want to be in your presence. Instead, what I want you to see, Peter, you're leaning away. I'm inviting you to come closer. I'm going to lean in your direction. It's followed closely in Luke chapter 5 by another story of Jesus calling another one of his disciples. You may remember this one. This is Jesus goes to the tax collector's booth of a man named Levi, who we know as Matthew. Goes to the tax collector's booth and he looks at this tax collector, this Roman sympathizer, this guy who is working with the Roman government against his own people. A person who was despised and rejected by his own countrymen, probably even by his own family, who they felt he had betrayed them in order to work for the Roman oppressors. Jesus shows up at the tax collecting booth of Levi and he says, I would like you to come and follow me. I would like you to come closer. I would like you to come walk with me, learn from me, watch the things that I'm going to do, hear the things that I'm going to say. I would like to change the direction and the course of your entire life. And what Levi does is he leaves his tax collecting business, which was a lucrative way to make a living, even if it wasn't the most respected way. Leaves his tax collecting business and says, I will come and follow you. And what Levi does is he throws a party, throws a dinner party. And he invites Jesus and he invites the other disciples. And then he invites all of his friends to come to the party. Now, the problem with all of Levi's friends is that they're people like him. It's a bunch of tax collectors and other various sinners inside of his community who are not well liked, who are not well respected by their neighbors, who are not righteous and religious people. And they invite Jesus and the disciples. And so Jesus sits down at the table with Levi and a bunch of tax collectors and a bunch of sinners. And this is the first moment in Luke's gospel where we hear this back and forth between Jesus and the religious leaders. And so the Pharisees and their scribes grumbled at his disciples, saying, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? Why are you spending time with these people? They're beneath you, they're beneath us. If you want to be a respected rabbi, if you want to teach people, you want people to come and follow you, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? And Jesus answered them, saying, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I haven't come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. Why would you hang out with these people, Jesus and Jesus' disciples? Why would you spend time at a table, having a meal, sharing fellowship, pretending like you've got anything in common with these people? They're sinners. They're tax collectors. They're not good, righteous, respectable Jewish people. They are the enemies of everything that we believe God is trying to do in the world. And Jesus says, I'm spending time with them because they're the ones who need healing. You think you're good. We'll deal with that in a minute. You think you're good. I didn't show up to talk to people who think they're good. I didn't show up. My mission and my message is not about people who think they've got their religious house all in order. I showed up because there are sick people who need a doctor. I didn't come to reach out to righteous people who thought they were already all set. I came to find the people who recognize their sinfulness and their brokenness, and I came to call them to repent, to turn around from their ways, and to follow me into the kingdom of their God. You want to leave them on the outside. You want to let them just do their thing and somehow they're going to magically come back to God. That's not going to happen, Jesus says. I showed up because there are sick people around you and they need me. And I'm not going to ignore them. And I'm not going to walk by them. And I'm not going to run from them. I'm going to run to them. In chapter 7, a couple of chapters after this moment where Jesus has this conversation with the Pharisees, a Pharisee invites Jesus to dinner. And you can imagine, again, inside of the context of Luke's story, inside chapter 7, as the Pharisee invites Jesus to dinner, part of what the Pharisee is doing is saying, hey, Jesus, we're going to have a dinner party, and this time we're going to invite the right people. Because you keep going around and hanging out with the wrong people. I would like to show you, as a good Pharisee, let me take you under my wing here. Let me help you understand what we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do. Let's surround ourselves with a bunch of righteous people. Let's have a dinner party where it's only good people are invited. And bad people and sinners and tax collectors, we're not inviting any of them in. The only problem is that people know where Jesus is, and sinners tended to find Jesus wherever he was. And a woman who was not of great reputation inside of their town, who has clearly had a previous interaction with Jesus, makes her way into the dinner party at the Pharisee's house. You remember this story. Begins weeping, washing Jesus' feet with her tears, and drying his feet with her hair. And the Pharisee says to himself, if Jesus knew what kind of person this was, if he knew who she was, what he would do is he would recoil from her. He would say, don't, sinful lady, don't touch me. Instead, Jesus says to the Pharisee who has hosted the dinner party, hey, I'm going to ask you a question. If two people are forgiven a debt, one is forgiven a little tiny debt and one is forgiven a major debt, who's going to love the person who forgives them more? The Pharisee says, well, it's the one who was forgiven the most. And he says, this woman understands that she's been forgiven the most. And so her love is not reserved by all of these boundaries that you've created and you've set up for. You didn't even anoint my head when I walked in the door. You didn't have the servants wash my feet, which you should have done. You didn't show me even the basic level of hospitality that should have been accorded to me. But she has been forgiven much, and so she loves much. And so what Jesus does is he takes a sinful woman and he raises her up and says, she's the example for you, Mr. Righteous, buttoned-up Pharisee, to learn from. Now, you can imagine how that goes over. Not too well. And it creates this tension in the middle of Luke's gospel where we see this over and over again then, where Jesus and the Pharisees and Jesus and the religious leaders are in conflict about Jesus' treatment of sinful people as opposed to his treatment of the righteous people. And then we get to one of these central sections in Luke's gospel, which is in Luke chapter 14 and 15. And in Luke 14 and 15, Jesus tells two stories about wedding banquets or banquets. And he talks to people about what's supposed to happen at the banquets. In the first story, he says, hey, don't go and take the places of honor when you get into the banquet. Let the host elevate you, because the ones who put themselves forward are going to be put to the back, and the ones who linger back are going to be exalted. The ones who humble themselves are going to be exalted. And then he tells another story in Luke chapter 14 about a man who was giving a wedding feast. And he sent out invitations to all of his friends, all of his family, and all of the people in his village to say, come, celebrate the wedding with us. And then one by one, the responses come back that people are too busy with too many other things to come to the wedding feast that they've been invited to. And so Jesus tells a story about how the master sent out his servant to go out and find some other people and just bring them in. And then when they bring in the first group of people, the master looks around and says that the house still isn't full. He sends the servant out, and here's how it goes in Luke chapter 14, verse 23. It says, and so the master said to the servant, go out to the highways and the hedges and compel people to come in so that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those men who were invited shall taste my banquet. Now this is the moment when Jesus stops just saying and doing things that bother people, the Pharisees, and just spending time with the sinners. And now he turns it around and he says, beyond just the fact that I'm going to spend time with the sinners and the tax collectors and the prostitutes, I want you to know that you think you're okay and you're not. You think that you are righteous, religious, buttoned up, you've got all your ducks in a row. Here's what I want you to know. You are being uninvited from God's banquet. And what Jesus does is he reverses the expectations of the people who are in his presence, in his company, so that those who expect to be invited are excluded, and those who expect to be excluded are now invited. And this is so important to what Jesus does in his mission and his message, right? Jesus keeps showing up and saying, look, you think that because you've got your religious ducks in a row, you go to church, you pay your tithes, you do all the things that you're you're supposed to do, you think that that gives you the right to be invited into the kingdom. And I just want you to know, it doesn't. The ones who are being invited are the ones for whom it is unexpected. It's the sinners. It's the tax collectors. In fact, he says, those are the ones who are entering the kingdom of heaven ahead of you. And you are going to be on the outside looking in. And then after Luke chapter 14, you get to this place in Luke 15. It's probably one of Jesus' more famous set of stories. In Luke 15, the early part of Luke 15, it says that the Pharisees and the religious leaders grumbled again about Jesus spending time with the tax collectors and the sinners, saying, why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? And then Jesus tells 3 stories in succession. He tells a story about a lost sheep, about a lost coin, and about 2 lost sons. And in the story of the lost sheep and the lost coin, he says, this is what those who lose the things will do. They'll go to any ends possible to recover the thing that they lost. The one who's lost the sheep will go to whatever ends are necessary to find the sheep, put it on his shoulders, run home with the sheep, and say, let's rejoice because the thing that was lost is found. And he says, this is the way that heaven responds when one sinner that you've overlooked comes home. And the woman who lost her one of 10 coins and says that she would sweep the house, would light the lamp, would do everything that she possibly could. And then when she finds the coin, invites her neighbors over, says, let's celebrate because the thing that I lost is found. And he says, this is the same way that heaven responds when people that you've overlooked, religious leaders and Pharisees, people that you've overlooked, return home. And he tells that great story about, we think about the one lost son, but it's really not just about the one lost son. It's about 2 lost sons. It's about the one lost son who runs away from his father's house and has a moment, an epiphany moment out in the slop with the pigs and says, my father's servants have it better than this. I'll go home. And perhaps he will welcome me home as one of his servants. And he prepares the whole speech. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm not worthy to be called your son, but make me like one of your hired servants. And he begins to go home, and you remember the story. From afar off, father sees the son coming home. And he runs to the son. And before the son can get through the speech, father has embraced him and welcomed him home and said, put a robe on him, put shoes on his feet, put my ring on his finger. My son who is lost has come home. And then the other son, his brother, stands on the outside of the party that the father is throwing for his prodigal son. And when the father goes out to him to plead with him, say, come in and celebrate with us. You should celebrate. We're here. Your brother who was lost is found. Your brother who was dead is alive. And the older brother says, I don't want anything to do with your party. I don't want anything to do with your celebration over this son of yours. Not my brother, this son of yours who squandered your wealth on prostitutes and wild living. I have nothing to give to him. And Jesus tells a story to tell, on the one hand, the tax collectors and the sinners, you are welcome home. And on the other hand, to tell the Pharisees and the religious leaders and the ones who are standing over here like this, looking down their noses at the ones that Jesus was welcoming home. Hey, your Father is inviting you into the celebration. Don't be so stubborn that you can't rejoice with heaven over one lost sinner who comes home. It's reiterated again, this theme. In Luke chapter 19, Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, on his way to his crucifixion, on his way to accomplish his exodus, his deliverance of the people. And in Luke chapter 19, you might remember this story. Jesus is walking through the city, and there's a man named Zacchaeus who is a tax collector, a chief tax collector, who is a short-statured man, a wee little man, as the kids' song that I grew up singing said. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. Climbed up in the sycamore tree for the Lord that he wanted to see. We just summarize the story by singing the song. And he looks out for Jesus, and Jesus looks out for him, sees him climbing the tree, says, Zacchaeus, would you come down from your tree? Because I would like to have dinner at your house today. And he goes into the house of this chief tax collector, and once again, predictably, not just the religious leaders and the Pharisees grumble, but now it says that the whole crowd grumbled about what Jesus was doing. What is he doing? Spending time with tax collectors and sinners. And Jesus said to him, Zacchaeus, today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. And if you could summarize the Gospel of Luke in one sentence, I would think it would be this one. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Jesus says in his own words, this is why I am here. I am not here to tell the people who think they are found that they're doing a great job. I am here to pursue men and women who know they can't find their way back home. I came to rescue the sinners. I came to heal the broken. I came to comfort those who mourn. I came to restore joy and salvation to homes, to hearts, to people whose lives have been torn apart by the brokenness of their sinfulness. He says, if you want to see what I'm here for people like Zacchaeus, that you've overlooked, that you've marginalized, that you pushed to the side, that you've said don't belong at the table. I'm telling you, they belong at my table. And the last example, the last story that we're going to read from, last one, isn't directly at a table, but I think the idea is there in the background. And you remember that when Jesus is led away to the cross to be crucified, he's crucified between two thieves. And the thief on one side just rages against Jesus. If you're the Messiah, if you're the Christ, if you're the Son of the living God, why don't you save yourself and save us? If you're who these people say that you are, if you're going to rescue and redeem Israel, how can you be hanging on a cross here? Save yourself and save us. And then the other next to him says, hey, he's innocent. I can see clearly exactly who he is. I believe that Jesus is who he said he is. I believe that he's the Christ. I believe that he's here to rescue people like us. We have gotten, so important, we have gotten what we deserved. He is getting what he doesn't deserve. And then you remember this moment. And then he said to Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, truly I say to you, today you'll be with me in paradise. And in the background of that statement is Jesus saying to this sinner, you have a seat at the great table in my kingdom. You, sinner hanging on a cross for the things that you've done, you have a seat at my table. This is Luke telling us consistently throughout the course of his gospel that Jesus is known still as a friend of sinners. That is incredibly good news for you and for me. Because no matter how religiously put together you think you have become, you and I are sinners. We're bad kings of our kingdom. We talked about that last week. We are oftentimes finding ourselves enslaved to our own desires that often lead us away from relationship with our Heavenly Father. We are often, to use what we talked about in John's Gospel, we are often living as if earth and heaven are two separate places. We don't live as if they live in the same space inside of our hearts and inside of our lives. We are sinners. This is good news for you. It is good news for me because you and I need Jesus to be a friend of sinners. We need Jesus to run to us, not from us. We needed it 20, 30, 50 years ago when you met Jesus, and I would say I hate to break it to you, but I don't hate to break it to you. You still need it today. You still need Jesus to run to you in your lostness, in your brokenness, in your unwillingness to yield your heart to Him sometimes. And this is a reminder to us about how we treat people who are outside. This is a reminder that our King, our Savior, was known as a friend of sinners. That the people that He spent time with most were the people who were outside the kingdom, who didn't feel like they were worthy of being included in the kingdom, who had been told over and over again, you're part of the problem. You're the reason. It's your fault. If you would just clean this up, straighten this up, get this thing fixed, take care of this, then we'd be good. Then the doors are open. This is a reminder that if we are going to genuinely follow Jesus, we cannot be known as people who run from sinners. We can't be known as people who run from sinners. Instead, people of Jesus, people who genuinely understand what Jesus was and was about and was doing in the world, they run to the sinners. And they set the table. And they invite the sinners to come sit at the table. And I don't mean that figuratively. I mean that literally. They sit down in coffee shops with the sinners. And they have dinner at their homes with the sinners. And they go to even the houses of the sinners. And they find themselves in places that religious people look around and say, you probably shouldn't be hanging out there. And what I want you to say is this is exactly where Jesus would be. And instead of following our own religious and righteous and self-righteous lead, standing on the outside, looking like this, down our nose at sinners. What if instead we were known as the people who welcomed them like Jesus did? Welcomed them. And Jesus invited them. Come and follow. Leave behind your kingdoms. Leave behind your ways. Leave behind those things that are breaking you and are breaking the people around you and enter into the kingdom of heaven. Jesus is known still as a friend of sinners. And I hope, as we kind of put a bow on this Jesus Project series, I hope that we never forget that that's true. Because that is such good news for you. And it is good news for your world. Would you pray with me this morning? Jesus, my prayer today is that we would be known as people who extend the invitation to those who are unlike us, to those who are broken, to those who feel excluded, lost, and without hope in this world. And that they would see in us and through us a posture of welcome, a posture of invitation, a posture of love and grace and compassion extended to them rather than fingers pointed in their direction. I pray that they would see in us and from us open arms that welcome them to the table, that invite them to leave behind their brokenness and find healing in you, Jesus. I pray that we, as your people, would be known as friends of sinners, that in us and through us you would bring heaven to earth, that you would rescue and redeem the people who are lost and enslaved, and that you would rule and reign as king over every kingdom. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.